Welcome everyone to another edition of Frank's Amazing Podcast. I'm your host Frank Gino. The New York Mets wrapped up their 3-game sets against the Kansas City Royals and the Cleveland Indians. And I said I was going to do a podcast after the Royals series. Well, it is after the Royals series, but I wasn't quite ready to do it yet because I was not sure of how I felt about the series, because it was one of the most up and down winning series I could really recall recently. Because yes, the Mets did win the series, taking 2 out of 3, but none of those games overwhelmed you. None of those games made you feel comfortable or confident. And that's really concerning considering how much the schedule increases after that Royals series. That Royals series was the real break in all the madness that was going on. If you think about the prior 2 series were the Braves and the Nationals, and the 2 series following the Royals are the Indians and the Braves again. And then right after you're going to face the Cubs, and then you get the Phillies. So that Royals series should have been like a give me, beat up on them, win the series, and that's that. But baseball does not work that way, and that's something you've seen all year and every year within baseball. You think of the biggest underdog odds, Baltimore Orioles against the Houston Astros a couple weeks ago, and the Orioles win the game. So in baseball, none of these games are won on paper. Nobody wins 162 games. No one even wins 120 games. So that tells you that you're going to lose at minimum 50-something games. So you know that there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be bad calls. There's going to be weird things, especially with these potentially juiced baseballs. You know what I mean? Players doing a lot better than you would expect to. And also, injuries were a part of this series because Jeff McNeil goes down with a hamstring strain against the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, was not available for the Kansas City series. Then J.D. Davis goes down with calf tightness, and that really compromised the Mets lineup because it put them into the situation where they were using a bottom 3 that consisted of Aaron Altair, who has no business on this team, Juan Lagares, who is improved but is no Jeff McNeil or J.D. Davis, and then Tomas Nido got his fair share of playing time in this series, which was beyond me, and he did not do anything offensively, and he wasn't that great defensively, especially on the 3rd game of the series. But I was more curious to see that after they have this really puzzling, can't make much out of series against the Royals, what were they going to do against a premier team in the Cleveland Indians, a team that is red hot, one of the best second-half teams, best ERA in the second half, All-Star Game MVP Shane Bieber in the first game going up against Steven Matz. And I'll tell you what, after the Mets swept the Indians, I feel a lot better about the Royals series, and I feel a lot better about the Mets in general, especially because of what is going on the injury bug-wise. Now that J.D. Davis has returned, still providing a major impact, hits a game-tying home run in the first game of the Indian series, then hits the game-winning hit in the second game of the series. So J.D. Davis makes a huge difference on this team, something that we did not expect going into the year. I remember very vividly the beginning of the season. Every time the Mets faced a left-handed pitcher, J.D. Davis was batting cleanup, and I was saying to myself, what has this guy done in his major league career to warrant having such a high spot in the order against top pitchers like a Patrick Corbin, big game against the Washington Nationals? And I'm like, I just don't understand it. But then when you see J.D. Davis have a multi-home run game against Patrick Corbin, and then after that, his playing time was very sparse. Like he would get a game here or there, then he'd get a bunch of games off. And J.D. Davis said in his most recent interview, since he's been doing so well, he's been getting a lot more attention from the media, both within the Mets and just baseball in general. But still, J.D. Davis was saying in interviews, so now that I've had more and more playing time, I'm playing every day, I have my rhythm, I have my timing. And one of the things you can tell about J.D. Davis is like the way he breaks down at bats. You can tell he's a thinking player. He is someone who goes up there with a plan. He is someone who adjusts depending on the at bat. I think of very vividly the Washington Nationals series where J.D. Davis hits that sacrifice fly to the opposite field against Daniel Hudson to put the Mets ahead. And he talked about how Chili Davis was talking to him about shortening his swing and getting out in front and just, hitting the ball up in the air so that you could get the sacrifice fly. Even though you might not have gotten a hit, you did what you had to do. So J.D. Davis does his at-bats differently. He doesn't just go up there trying to hit homers or try to do the same thing every time. And he has made a big-time difference. And once he came back from his calf issue in the Indian series, think of the difference he made. The Mets probably would not have won either one of those 2 games if it were not for J.D. Davis. And not having him against the Kansas City series, it was a big deal because one of the things that really, really stood out to me in that Kansas City series, one of the negatives, is how many runners the Mets left on base. I mean, there was a point in time in one of the games where in every inning, in their first few innings, the Mets would have multiple base runners on, and then they would strand all of them. And that was really, driving me crazy, because it's like, here's your opportunity to beat this really inferior team, and yet you aren't doing it because you're too busy grounding into double plays, or you're popping up, or you're striking out, not making productive outs, not getting the guys over, or getting the guys in. And for me, I just think that having a good hitter, a guy that is now batting above 300, instead of someone like Aaron Alter who's batting below 100, makes a huge, huge difference in the amount of runs that you are able to produce. I do think that one of the other things about the New York Mets series against the Kansas City Royals, they lost the Friday game, and I do believe that travel was an impact on that. I'm not a person that ever likes excuses or wants to make excuses, but I do believe that the quick turnaround of flying from Atlanta to Kansas City, I don't think it's not the closest trip in the world. It's pretty far. And, Syndergaard was also dealing with a cold, they said at the time. And for the Mets, it was just a weird lineup. They were stranding a lot of base runners. It was not a very good game. Then Saturday, you get a vintage Jacob deGrom, excellent performance. Bullpen hangs on. You get a big hit from Alonso late to put the Mets out in front. And this was actually an instance where Aaron Alter was very useful, because Alonso hits a ball up the middle. Second baseman makes the stop. He tries to fire it to home, and for some reason, the guy from the Royals cut it off, and Aaron Alter was able to score from second base on a ground ball up the middle. And that is because the one thing that Alter has that he does extremely well, and actually the only thing he does well in general, is running. He is a very, very fast runner, and again, he was able to score from second base. And one of the things that stood out to me as a negative from the Cleveland Indians series is the Mets' misuse of Aaron Alter. With the way the team is currently set up, the only way Aaron Alter should be on the field is as a pinch runner. And you're saying to yourself, okay, well, what would be the scenarios where you would use Aaron Alter? And I'll give you two of them. I'll give you one of them. Anytime Todd Frazier is on base, and it happened multiple times in the Cleveland Indians series. You think of the sacrifice fly that Juan Lagares tried to hit, and Todd Frazier gets nailed at home plate. You think of when Rajai Davis went up to bunt. This was a bunch of mistakes in one. Rajai Davis bunts with Todd Frazier as the lead runner at second base, and the pitcher is able to throw out Todd Frazier at third because he doesn't have any speed. Had you pinch run Aaron Alter at second base, he would have made the third base, and then right after that, you got the top of the order up. You know that Rosario and Panic and Alonso are going to drive in Aaron Alter from third base. So that was another run that cost you. And then when Todd Frazier got thrown out at home plate, that was the end of the inning. That would have been a sacrifice fly for Juan Lagares, because Aaron Alter would have been safe, and that's another run that you have. And for me, you're like, okay, but Aaron Alter doesn't play third base. True, but who does play third base? Luis Guillorme. Guillorme, that's the only value that he has, is that he's a good defensive player. So it's a perfect switch. You make a double switch. You put Guillorme in for Frazier, and Aaron Alter is done. You don't need him anymore. He did his pitch running. He got you a run, and that's all he needs to do. He does not need to be pinch hitting. He does not need to be starting. If you want to put him in the outfield instead of J.D. Davis or even McNeil, I'm fine with that, because, again, he has more speed, so he could play a better outfield. But other than that, what is the point of even having him on the team if you're going to park him on the bench and not use him late in games where he would make the difference between having a run and not having a run? And that is one of the things I'm concerned about, not only with the Royals series or the Indians series or the Braves series, whoever it is. I still do have my concerns about the Mets manager, because these are things that he should be doing. Whatever the analytics say, whatever his feelings say, whatever if he loves the players or not, these are things that you have got to do. I don't care if Todd Frazier doesn't like it. You know what? If Todd Frazier doesn't like it, maybe you shouldn't have a batting average of the 230s. And what are you going to do? Tell the guy to get faster? It's not going to happen. Todd Frazier's only getting slower as the days go on. You know what I mean? So I just don't know if in these tight games, so let's just say this series against the Braves or the series against the Cubs, these are not the Kansas City Royals. When these games are either tied or one-run difference, that one run can cost you the game that you did not get because you were not willing to sub out Todd Frazier and make Alter your pinch runner. I know it may seem like something so small, but you guys have got to understand that with the way the Mets bullpen is, with how good these other teams are, these games are going to be so close. And think of, best case scenario, the Mets make the wild card, right? That means you have to do a wild card game, and that's not going to be any type of game. It's actually going to be a really tough game. So if the game is a one-run difference, don't you think having the one run on the sacrifice fly or having the guy in scoring position due to the bunt because you had more speed on the bases would make a major difference? It does. Now, Aaron Altair is probably, and I actually know, he is not going to be on the wild card game roster. Fine. But here's the other thing. This is another thing I really want to talk about here. So, one of the big things that's been happening this week is the rehabbing from the New York Mets. Guys that you did not necessarily expect. Number one, Jed Lowry is finally doing rehab games for the first time this season after getting injured during spring training. So that's a big deal that all of a sudden within the next week or two, Jed Lowry is going to be on this team. Number two, Brandon Nimmo's rehabs are finally going well, and he's going to be on this team within the next week. And Jeff McNeil should be back on Saturday because he's been rehabbing. And here's a dark horse. Robinson Cano has started running and has been taking ground balls and been taking batting practice. Now, if a guy tore his hamstring, why would he run the bases, do batting practice, and take ground balls if he did not have intentions of coming back? So, we know McNeil's going to be back. We know Nimmo's going to be back. Lowry is probably going to be back, and there's a small chance that Robinson Cano is going to be back. So, you are now going to be in, for like the first time in forever, where the Mets actually have too many good position players and don't know where to put them. And here's the thing. Todd Frazier cannot play over Joe Panik, he cannot play over J.D. Davis, and he cannot play over Jeff McNeil. And I'm concerned, and I actually know, that Mickey Callaway is going to do that. I know he has already talked about keeping Todd Frazier out there, and I do not love putting Joe Panik on the bench because here's the thing. Extremely small sample size, but Joe Panik is batting .343 as a member of the New York Mets. He puts the ball in play at a great rate. He strikes out at a low rate. He plays a really good second base. He knows how to play second base. He usually knows how to run the bases except for the double play with Ruben Tejada against Kansas City. Joe Panik made a rare mistake there. But still, he is just a much more solid player. He's a clutch player. He's a guy with playoff experience of the San Francisco Giants World Series teams. And I believe that he provides so much more value in a lineup instead of Todd Frazier, especially in a wild card game and in a wild card pennant or postseason run, or whatever terminology you want to use. And for me, Joe Panik does not play third base. I understand that, but who does? Jeff McNeil. I think you have to give it a try. I know the Mets defense is bad as it is, having J.D. Davis in left field. And you know what? He's improved, just like the way Dominic Smith has improved. And I think if you put Jeff McNeil at third base right now, let him work on it. I'm sure he'll do a fine job as it is. It's something that he'll get even better at, and he'll be ready come postseason time. And here's the other thing you have. Once you have the lead in this lane game, you do defensive switches. You move guys around. You put Jeff McNeil back in the left field. You could sub Todd Frazier in the game to play third base for the past couple innings. I don't really care. But I just know that you're going to be facing tougher pitchers, which means that scoring runs is going to be even more challenging, so you're going to need a better lineup out there. Now, if Robinson Cano comes back, unfortunately, he has a guaranteed spot in this lineup, and that is something that I'm not thrilled about because Robinson Cano, he's had his struggles the entire year. 1-3 home run game against the Padres didn't even matter because it took him almost a week to get another hit, just a single hit. So that 3 home run game didn't mean anything. Robinson Cano had not figured anything out. He was starting to get some hits against the Pirates, but still, we never know if that actually means anything. And is he going to be back in rhythm by the time he comes back, which will be sometime in September? No way. But if Robinson Cano does come back, he's playing second base. That does mean that Joe Panik is benched. And again, I don't like that because here's the thing. Joe Panik, again, he's batting .340 as a Met. Robinson Cano hasn't even sniffed .270 as a Met. You know what I mean? So Joe Panik hasn't been a little bit better than Cano. He's been significantly better than Robinson Cano. Joe Panik has gotten a hit almost every single game that he has played as a member of the Mets. And he always moves runners over. He gets a lot of RBI hits. He gets 2-out hits. He gets 2 strike hits. Joe Panik is just a solid player. Not an all-star. Not a guy you build your team around, but he is a guy you definitely want on your team. And with a team like the Mets that have guys that strike out at a rapid rate, guys like Pete Alonso, Michael Conforto, they're great hitters. They've been great this season, have hit a bunch of home runs, but they also strike out a ton. Ahmed Rosario is still prone to the strikeout. Todd Frazier is a strikeout machine. Wilson Ramos strikes out more than I thought he would. So to have a guy like Joe Panik who actually doesn't strike out, you really need with the way the team is constructed. And if you've watched these games the past couple of weeks, these games that the Mets have been winning, you never know what's going to happen when you put the ball in play. I'll give you the perfect example, especially with Joe Panik. Here you go. In the Cleveland Indians series, when Joe Panik hits that pop-up to left field, you're thinking, all right, it's a fly ball out. Panik didn't get the job done there. But the left fielder drops the ball, and Joe Panik ends up scoring later on in the inning. And that is just the value of putting the ball in play. Had Joe Panik been like Todd Frazier or been like Michael Conforto where he strikes out, the Mets don't get that run. So again, in these close games against these better teams, a pop-up, it could make the difference in the game just because you put the ball in play. Think of all the times that the Mets have hit a ground ball and the guy drops it, or the Todd Clippers throwing it over the first baseman just because you put the ball in play. I know in that instance it was Todd Frazier, but of course, again, you just don't want guys that are striking out at a rapid rate against these better teams in these close games. So I still would have Joe Panic playing over Robinson Cano, and I know it won't happen, and I'm just concerned that the growth and just all this development of the young core that I've talked about with McNeil and Rosario and Davis and Alonso and Conforto, and you can throw. So Wilson Ramos, per game, he'll get his hit for the sake of his hitting streak, but included is a ground ball or two to the left side of the infield, whether it's shortstop or third base, and that's a unproductive out. And one of the big reasons why it's an unproductive out is because of Wilson Ramos's lack of speed. And if there are any runners on base during that time, it is going to be a double play. And you don't want to be hitting into a lot of double plays when you are a team that, as you play these better teams, low-scoring games, close games, you can't be hitting into double plays and missing golden opportunities to drive in runs. And the other thing that Wilson Ramos has been doing, again, he strikes out every now and then because I feel like he overswings just a bit too much. And you think of someone who is as built as him, I would expect that he would just try to touch the ball and it would go very, very far. And if you notice, the other thing about Wilson Ramos is that when he gets hit, most of the time it's to the opposite field anyway. And all of his outs are those ground balls to short, all those ground balls to third. Pitches he is rolling over, so I wish that Wilson Ramos would actually shorten up his swing. Just keep putting it to the opposite field. If you keep getting base hits, base hit, it's a lot better than trying to risk hitting in a very, very rare home run and all the other times that you get the ground ball to short or the ground ball to third. And again, these are all just things to be watching as these tougher games progress and things that I'm going to say. Remember I told you that Wilson Ramos was hitting too many ground balls to the left side? Oh, that double play cost the Mets the games. Oh, remember those times I told you that Todd Frazier's too slow? Oh, he got thrown out home plate. It cost the Mets the game. So these are all things that you guys should just be aware of that I have noticed and that I want to share with you. But one of the things that I will say, all in all, after watching the Cleveland Indians series, I'm actually very proud of the New York Mets that they finally put together a really good series and they beat a very good team. You want to say, oh, well, Cleveland was tired because they had just played the Yankees before. Guess what? Cleveland Indians had an off day on Monday, and they did really well against the Yankees. Did they win every game? No, but they blew the Yankees out in one game, and they played them tough in all the other ones. So I don't want to hear the excuse that Cleveland was in New York too long. I really don't buy that because if they're supposed to be, they have Terry Francona as their manager, not Mickey Callaway, okay? They have this great pitching ERA, both starting and in the bullpen in the second half. They got Shane Bieber on the mound. They got all these other guys. They still have Frankie Lindor and Jose Ramirez and Yasiel Puig and Carlos Santana and Roberto Perez and Tyler Naquin and Greg Allen and Jason Kipnis, who was a real, tough out in this series. That there was no excuse for the Cleveland Indians. The Mets actually swept a really good Cleveland Indians team, and the Mets did it as a team themselves. Luis Guillorme got some big hits in the last game of the series. Juan Lagares, he's been good ever since McNeil went down, and that has been such a big deal because when Jeff McNeil went down against the Atlanta Braves, I was really worried because the Mets were not playing well against the Braves at the time, and they were losing ground in the wild card after they had gotten so close. I mean, they were right there after they had just won the series against the Washington Nationals. And when Juan Lagares was going to be taken on for Jeff McNeil, I said, oh my gosh, the offensive drop-off is so significant, it is unbelievable. Because McNeil is a guy who's batting in the 330s, and at the time, Juan Lagares' average was still under 200. And you just felt that it was really going to cost the Mets big time because, again, playing the tougher teams, you're going to lose a run here or there, and you're not going to be able to perform. But Lagares has increased his average dramatically, getting on base. And here's the thing, not only with hits, he's also been drawing walks, which is something that Juan Lagares has never done throughout his career, even when he was starting, because he has a very high chase rate, not a good, vision of the strike zone. He swings out a lot of pitches that are out of the strike zone, which led for a lot of strikeouts for him and a low on-base percentage. But Juan Lagares has done a very good job at the plate, and he's been tremendous in center field, which is something that even when he was out there, he still was not doing, and that was his greatest attribute. We talk about Altera being known for his speed, or we talk about, Todd Frazier being known for being an occasional power hitter. What Juan Lagares was known for is his defense. What Luis Guillorme is known for is his defense. But Pete Alonso, he's been swinging much better lately than when the All-Star break had ended and he was batting in the 180s. His average is much higher. Wilson Ramos batting over 300 in August. Joe Panik, I talked about hitting 340s. Ahmed Rosario, second best hitter in the National League in the second half, average-wise, having a terrific August. J.D. Davis, highest batting average in the second half in the National League, having a tremendous August. Michael Conforto has been very good, especially with his home runs, getting on base at a good clip, not striking out as much, getting a few hits here or there that are not home runs, drawing his walks. So he's played a very good right field. So Michael Conforto has done a very good job. And before you know it, I just told you the entire team. Todd Frazier, he hit his one home run against the Nationals. It was a huge home run. Tied the game, really got the season going. And he'll have a single here and a double there, even laying games. I mean, he's good laying games. That's the one thing he does do well. In the first few innings, he's very bad. So that is why I think it's even more advantageous to start Jeff McNeil at third base. And then as a pinch hitter, you could go to Todd Frazier instead of Luis Guillorme or instead of Aaron Altair. You could use Todd Frazier, who tends to do good laying games anyway. And you don't have to deal with his lack of speed and his occasional miscues defensively. I know Todd Frazier is a solid third baseman, but every now and then, he'll just randomly drop a ball on a backhand or not field a ball at all, and he gets these very, very random errors at inopportune times. But all in all, I am very proud of them. I think the starting pitching was good. Steven Matz was tremendous in the first game. He was really, really good. And I'm very happy that Mickey Callaway let him go out there for another inning. Even though he gave up the first two guys they got on base, then he pulled them. I'm perfectly okay with that because of the last podcast, how I was yelling that Mickey Callaway made a major mistake, taking Matz out of the game after he had retired so many batters in a row and was pitching so well. This time he gave Matz a chance. Didn't work, but Justin Wilson came through and really saved the game with great strikeouts against Francisco Lindor, who's an amazing player, and Mercado, who's a nice rookie for the Cleveland Indians. Two very good strikeouts from Justin Wilson. And all in all, the bullpen, they did what they were supposed to do. Brad Brock may give up a run here, or, another reliever will give up a run. Luis Avilan giving up the go-ahead home run to Carlos Santana. But in all those instances, those were bad matchups for those pitchers. This goes to Mickey Callaway. Brad Brock should not be facing lefties, and Luis Avilan should not be facing righties. And it was very tough for the Mets because the Cleveland Indians have a more usual amount of switch hitters and good switch hitters. They're best hitters. Francisco Lindor, Carlos Santana, and Jose Ramirez, all switch hitters. So even if you were to you can't put Brock or Avilan in because either way, they're going to be at a disadvantage because that hitter is just going to switch. If Brock is pitching, Santana's left-handed. If Avilan's pitching, he's batting right-handed. And either way, he's bringing in runs. So the Cleveland Indians are not the best team for Avilan or for Brad Brock, but Jeurys Familia has significantly improved, and that's a big deal for the Mets because of their bullpen struggles, because Jeurys Familia is supposed to be a big-time contributor, a back-end-of-the-reliever guy for this team. Jeurys Familia is finally fitting that bill. Seth Lugo, not as good as he was, but still good enough, still getting the job done. Edwin Diaz, his last outing, I'm pretty sure was that Royals game where he was giving up some runs and he had to get out of a bases-loaded jam. And I'm concerned that eventually the Mets are going to have to use Edwin Diaz again. And they're going to use him in a safe situation. And Edwin Diaz has not pitched in a week. So what do you think Edwin Diaz is going to do? You think he's going to be lights out, getting the ball over, throwing strikes, quality strikes, not walking guys, not giving up home runs? Not a chance. I know that when Edwin Diaz comes in, he's going to be a disaster because he has not pitched in a week. And no matter what, there is not going to be a good matchup for him. There is no good matchup against the Braves, and there is no good matchup against the Cubs. One of the things that is very good for the Mets is that during this Braves series, the Nationals are playing the Cubs, the two wild card teams. So no matter what, whether the Mets do, if the Mets win, they gain ground. If the Mets lose, they don't lose that much ground because one of the other wild card teams are losing. What they have to hope is that if they have another bad series against the Braves, that the Cardinals are not winning. Because if the Cubs win and the Cardinals win, that makes either wild card spot much tougher. And if the Phillies are winning, because then the Phillies get in front of you and the Brewers. So the Mets, they are not anywhere out of the woods yet. There is still a lot to go. The Mets cannot let up. Even if they have a good series against the Braves and a good series against the Cubs, it doesn't matter because there are still so many teams that are in it, and it is just so tight between all those teams. So hoping for a really good series from the Mets against the Braves. Make up for the last series that was very disappointing to me. You have Jacob deGrom on the mound. You're home where you've been good, and just keep it up. That is all you can hope for as a Met fan. And I will be there to talk about the Braves series once it has concluded. Hopefully you enjoy this. Sorry for all the camera delays and cutouts and blurriness and all the other things that's going on. Just trying different things each time to try to improve one thing, but then something else goes bad. But if you did like this video, leave a like. If there's something you'd like to say about, comment. If you'd like to keep up with future videos, subscribe. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Have a good one, everybody.